Greetings, groovy geographers. Hello and welcome. My name is Rachel Cunningham, pronouns she, her, hers, and I will be your instructor for Geography 300. So this first video is our first lecture for the class, and we'll be looking at kind of what is geography, which then of course leads us to what is GIS. So again, GIS can stand for Geographic Information Systems, which focuses on the specific software and hardware that's being used to do the kind of data analysis, spatial analysis. It also can stand for Geographic Information Science, which is a little more what this class covers, which is going to be not just the how-to, but also kind of the implications, the applications, and the ethics in terms of the whole field. GIS is a rapidly growing field. It's very high in demand. And humans are still kind of grappling of what does it mean to create spatial data, to make maps of what could be sensitive information, and how was this information used? So those are some of the things that we will talk about in this semester as a whole. But for today, let's go ahead and just talk about what is geography. How the setup for this class is your lecture slides as a PDF will always be included on your Canvas page, along with a lovely video. So you can follow along in the slides, take notes as you'd like. You know, you can have my audio playing in the background on your morning commute or as you're playing while you're washing dishes or whatnot, whatever works best for you. I see a few familiar names on the roster, so welcome back, those of you who've had classes with me before. I also see some new names, so welcome to the Cool Kids Club. For those of you who are geography majors, this class is required to complete the degree. And for those of you who are not geography majors, GIS is applicable across disciplines, right? So folks who work in public health use GIS a lot, folks who work in wildlife biology or plant biology, any type of environmental science or life science use GIS a lot. Folks who work in administrative justice or political science will use GIS a lot. So there's a huge applications regardless of your major. Okay, so let's go ahead and jump into our first lecture. Okay, it's always this game of where I move my face on the screen so that my face doesn't block out important information. But I know folks like to have some sort of human contact, so you know that I'm real and not just a robot. I'm not actually in the garden, I'm in my office on campus, but it's a mess. So for those of you who are in the Bay Area, I am on the Skyline College campus Monday through Thursday. Come on by. My office is in building 12. I'm in room 140, and also there are computers on campus that have QGIS installed. So if you need any help with any of the homework, come on over. I'll be here. Awesome. All right. So geographic concepts and techniques. So what is geography and how do we do geography? Okay. So first of all, oops, get my computer to cooperate. What is geography? So I like to break down the word, and geo means the earth, and graphy means to write or to describe. So you think of a biography is the story of a life, or an ethnography is the story of a culture. So geography literally translates to describe the earth, to write of the earth, the story of the earth. And that really is what geography is. It's different than geology, although there's a lot of overlap. We teach a little bit of geology and geography, a bit of geography and geology, right? But this is going to cover not just the physical aspects, but the human aspects as well. And so the kind of more fancy definition is, it's the science that studies the relationships among natural systems, geographic areas, society, cultural activities, and the interdependence of all of these over space. And so that's that key idea of that everything is connected, and how does that relate to the idea of space, of location. I've heard the idea of it's the why of where, and I have now forgotten what geographer said that. I did not come up with that. But the why of where, it's like, why are things placed where they are, right? It's not by accident. Sometimes it is, but usually it's not by accident. And so geography is a study of how do things get placed where they are in the world, and why do we see different patterns across the planet in different locations. Okay. So the key way that we study geography, and what you'll be doing a lot of in this class, is what's called spatial analysis. And so you're basically analyzing space, and we mean like physical space, not outer space, but like location, okay? So you're looking at patterns and variations over space. You're going to compare and contrast different regions, different locations, places, and then compare their phenomenon. So the example I always use is vending machines, right? So if you're on Skyline College campus, you might know where all the good vending machines are. Or if you're in your workplace, other schools, baseball stadiums, right? We see vending machines all over the place, but not all vending machines have the same things. So think about the closest vending machine to wherever you are, where you've been recently, and think about what kind of things it sold there. So for example, on Skyline College campus, so far, I mean, most of them are empty because it's COVID. So there's like nothing stocked in any of them. So far, I've seen a lot of Pepsi, a little Pepsi product in our vending machines. And I've seen a lot of Cheetos. I accidentally bought some hot Cheetos the other day, actually, in our vending machines. Okay. So that kind of brings up some questions of, well, why do we have Pepsi and not Coke? Why is there Pepsi and not Mountain Dew? Why is there Pepsi and not hot chocolate, right? Or, insert whatever beverage you'd rather have here. Why do we have Cheetos and not gluten-free seaweed snacks, right? Now, there are vending machines in the world that sell Mountain Dew and Coca-Cola and gluten-free seaweed snacks, but they're not here at Skyline College. And so the question is, we have two different locations with two different types of vending machines. Why are they different? All right. So I was born and raised in California. So most of my experience of vending machines is in California, but I've also traveled quite a bit. And I remember being in New Orleans and I saw a vending machine that sold cigarettes. And I was like, I thought this was illegal, but there it was in New Orleans, a vending machine that sold cigarettes. Sometimes you'll go to a truck stop and you'll see vending machines that sell condoms and Advil and, 24-hour energy drinks. So again, it's this comparison of why do different vending machines around the world sell different things, depending on where you are for your studies. I went to SF State for a while, and SF State had vending machines that sold Scantrons. You can go to the airport and they'll have vending machines that sell like iPhones, right? So the idea of why do we see a Pepsi vending machine on a college campus versus an iPhone vending machine at the airport, what does that tell us about maybe the economics, about the demographics, people who live there, the demand of different things, maybe politics, right? So Pepsi versus Coca-Cola, that's going to be someone wrote a a contract, for those different products. So that's the kind of thing you do, is you're comparing different locations and what you see that's the same or different there. It's super interdisciplinary, right? Again, I don't know about people who have PhDs in vending machine science. Maybe someone does. But again, if you're studying vending machines, you could be studying economics. You could be doing transportation. You could be doing network studies, right? And of course, we could have the same scenario talking about distribution of endangered mongooses or talking about distribution of voting patterns, right? Pretty much any discipline that connects to location, which is most of them, can be part of spatial analysis. Some of the techniques that we use, which you may or may not use through this class, it is up to you for some of these. You can do a lot of interviews, surveys, field observations. So you can collect your own data by talking to people, by taking measurements out in the field, right? All of these are valid ways of doing geography, right? It depends on what specifically it is that you're studying. Again, if you are writing your thesis on vending machines, you're probably going to go out into the field, visit lots of different vending machines and see what kind of things they sell there. Versus if you're doing your study on middle-aged women who voted in the last election, you'll probably do like interviews, right? So it really depends on what you're studying. So we tend to divide the field of geography up into different subcategories, which is tough because we all do a little bit of everything. But in general, when you're going into a geography program, they're going to have you look at kind of two different genres, right? And that's human geography. So that's where are the people and where do we practice Islam versus Christianity? Where do we speak Mandarin versus Cantonese? Why do people move from one point to another? Why do people practice agriculture different ways? So it's very human focused. And then we also have physical geography, which is going to be more of measurements and calculations and statistics. So it's going to be where do certain types of trees grow and why do they grow a certain height? Where do certain kinds of fish live and why do they swim in those specific channels, right? And so you might do more calculations, you might be measuring things you find out in the field, and you might run more statistical analysis for that. Okay, so pretty much anything you do somehow fits into geography. You're all geographers already, even though you don't know it. The third branch of geography that's not listed here is geographic technology, right? Technical geographic, and that's where this class fits in. Again, some of you may be making maps of people and some of you making maps of plants, and those are both valid. So technical GIS is going to be the tools that we use to study geography. So folks who make GIS software and also things like remote sensing or the lots of works with like drones and aerial imagery and manned flights are all going to feed into that study as well. Okay. So the scientific method is a very common thing that is used mostly in the physical geography aspect, but we do see it in other parts of geography as well. And so depending on where you went to school and how old you are, you may have been taught the scientific method in a specific way. So when I was in school, for example, we were taught, okay, you're going to identify the question. So what's my question? So we could say here, my question is about vending machines. Why can't I buy gluten-free seaweed snacks on the Skyline College campus, right? Or why do we have certain things in the vending machines at Skyline College? And then you'll gather information. So maybe I'll go out and survey different vending machines. Maybe I'll like talk to the people who stock them, like the salespeople, and kind of ask, oh, so how come you do it this way? And maybe I'll look at some like receipts of different sales. And then you'll create a hypothesis. And a hypothesis is a fancy way of saying an educated guess or a proposed explanation. So you've already started cultivating some ideas and you kind of, pull together some tidbits and you have some data in front of you. And you might say, you know what, I have an idea of why we sell certain things in our vending machines. And so maybe my hypothesis is we sell Pepsi on campus because our president loves Pepsi rather than Coke. I have no idea. I've never asked her. If you ever meet Dr. Moreno, ask her, do you prefer Pepsi or Coke? No, I'm kidding. So yeah, maybe that's my hypothesis. We sell Pepsi because President Moreno prefers it, right? It's a proposed explanation. Now the rest of my research is focused on, I have to either prove that I'm right or prove that I'm wrong. Either way, you're gaining information, right? So either way, whether you disprove or accept your hypothesis, you're getting information that will help you do further studies, okay? So I create predictions. So maybe I'll, if I go to a meeting with Dr. Moreno and I leave her Pepsi, she'll take it versus if I leave Coke, she won't take it, or something like that. And then you'll start doing experiments. So what happens if one vending machine on campus has Coca-Cola in it instead? What will happen? So you start to collect data and then you have to analyze the data. So maybe after I've gone through and I've tampered with all the vending machines on campus, I'll start looking at like how many things sold, how many more Pepsi sold than Coca-Cola, how many more Cheetos sold than gluten-free seaweed snacks, right? I'll go through and analyze that data. And then once I do that, I can kind of go look back at my hypothesis and say, yeah, you're right. We totally have Pepsi here because it's everyone's favorite. Or no, actually, that's not why we have Pepsi because maybe the cola sold more, right? So you either accept or reject your hypothesis. And either way, it's valuable information because it helps set the stage for your next study. The problem with this is it's kind of like a cool, I got to step 7, I'm done, we're never done with science. We're never done with research, right? In this class, you'll all be doing your own research projects. And there's a point where you will turn it in for a grade. But if you had another 3 years, you probably could do a lot more with it, right? So increasingly, scientists are telling us this isn't the way to do science because you're never done. Instead, let's make it a circle, right? So this is from UC Berkeley, their Museum of Paleontology. And so, excuse me, it's much more an idea of you still gather data, you still have a hypothesis, and you still have observations, but you also are going back and forth. So as I have observations, I might go back and look at the data, and I might come back with a new hypothesis. And that's okay. These errors are telling me that you can go back and forth and you can update your hypothesis and change it as you get more information. A lot of it here too is going to be feedback because I am not an expert in vending machines, nor in soda for that matter, but there are lots of people who are. So if I go and I talk to other students and say, hey, what kind of things do you want in your vending machine? Or why did you buy that thing in the vending machine versus not that thing? Or I can talk to the folks who stock the vending machines and ask them, well, what kind of sales do you see? So I can get feedback from other people in the community who are using the products. I can inform policy. So if I see that students are really like, no, we really want to have vending machines that sell Krispy Kreme donuts, right? That's a big demand right now. Then maybe we can go ahead and make a new policy that we start making a new vending machine on campus. So it's much more collaborative. We're not working in silos. We're working with parts of the community, with experts in the field, and we're always coming back and we're readjusting and we're never done, right? It's a cycle. So we see this a lot, of course, in GIS because a lot of GIS is very time-based. And so you could make a map of wildfires in 2020. Well, as soon as you publish that map, if a new fire starts, your map is already out of date. And so just being used to always revisiting your work, re-examining it in the light of new data, make sure that you're always the most up to date with new information. Okay, so again, what is GIS? It's Geographic Information Systems. You've all signed up for this class. Why, right? So again, this idea of a hardware and a software combined. It's going to collect, store, manipulate, analyze, and display spatial data. So it's data over space. And then all of this information is stored inside what's called a layer. So throughout this class, we're going to, and of course, this lecture here is much more just on like, what are we doing with geography? Eventually, you will learn how to make your own layers and how to turn them on and off. And so example here is if I've got, this has geologic structures and soil types and vegetation types. Again, both geology and plant biology use GIS quite a bit. So if I want to know where does the Mariposa lily grow, then maybe I have this vegetation type where 1 stands for Mariposa lily, and the 2 stands for a miniature lupin, and a 3 stands for California poppy, right? So maybe I have this whole layer here where I have different chunks of flowers. Then I have another layer here, that's the soil type. So maybe this one's gonna have serpentine soil, and this one's gonna have Sacramento loam soil. Well, if I'm doing analysis where I want to know where in California do I have Mariposa lily growing on areas that are not serpentine soil? That's the kind of question that a wildlife biologist or a plant biologist might ask. What you can do is you can do analysis where you can see, where does my Mariposa lily section overlap with my serpentine soil section? Okay, that's the kind of analysis you might do. And again, there's endless possibilities, but this is kind of that sneak peek. It's a series of layers, and each layer will have its own information. So this layer is just soils, this layer is just plants, this layer is just vending machines, right? Whatever it might be. Okay, and so you can, again, turn them on, turn them off, and adjust how you have them linked together depending on what your question is. Some of your layers can get very complicated. So kind of cleaning up your layers as you go along is a skill that we'll practice together, because yeah, sometimes you're like, I have 14 layers, I only need 3. That's very common. That's a very common issue that GI scientists have, and so we'll practice that together. Another topic that is big in geographic techniques is global positioning systems, or GPS. And so the idea for this is, if I have my phone, right, and you can kind of see it with my shadow there. If I have my phone and I want to know where I am, what's happening is my phone is sending out a signal. It says, hey, help, where am I? There are a series of satellites in the atmosphere around us. There are lots of them, and some of them are private and some of them are government. Whenever a satellite receives that ping, right? So here's satellite A, kind of hanging out, doing its own thing. And it's like, hey, I heard a ping. There's something down there. And so all a satellite can say is, somewhere in this red circle, there's a thing. Well, that's not very useful because it's a very large red circle. Right? So then the next satellite says, oh yeah, I heard a thing too. I also found a thing. The satellite B will say, it's somewhere in this green circle. So now we know it's satellite A and B heard it. It's going to be somewhere in this realm in here. Again, not very helpful, because there's a big difference between being here versus being here, right? We use the term triangulation because it requires a minimum of 3 GPS satellites to tell us exactly where something is, okay? So when you have 3 different satellites and all of them have that point where they intersect, that tells you where your signal is coming from, right? GPS, of course, if you have a smartphone, if your location services are not turned off, the satellites can find you, right? That's why a lot of folks will turn their location services off. But if you've used Waze or Google Maps or iMaps or anything to find locations, Yelp if you're trying to find the closest burrito place, this is all going to be using a type of GPS. Is your phone or your Garmin or TomTom sends out a signal, right? That then those satellites say, hey, there it is. We also use this for things like if you're tracking endangered animals. So if you maybe have tranquilized a cheetah or a giraffe, you can fit them with a collar, and then scientists can follow those animals and see where are they hunting, where are they finding mates, have they been poached. So you also can track animals that way too, and humans, let's be honest, unfortunately, in terms of like missing persons and rescue persons, or persons of interest in terms of criminal activity, right? So this is a big one that we all use, that we forget that we use, but it's a big part of kind of how we navigate a lot of our urban lifestyles. Remote sensing is one that all of you are doing right now. All of you are either watching my video or listening to my video, depending on your personal style, or you're reading my notes. So whatever it is that you're doing, somehow you are interacting with my voice, my face, my spoken word, whatever it may be, right? But you're not physically here with me in my office. You are sensing me remotely. So remote sensing is the act of scanning the Earth and its objects from a distance, right? From a remote location. So you are at your home, in the library, in your car, but you were still able to either hear or see me just from a remote location from I'm here on campus, right? It can be passive, which means that you don't emit any information, you're only receiving it. I'm going to just take a guess that none of you have like laser eyeballs. You aren't like shooting lasers out into space to come find me, I hope. So you are passively receiving this. If you're watching it, if you're listening to it, it's a little bit different, right? If you're watching this visually, then you are passively, your eyeballs are passively taking information from a distance, right? However, there are many technologies that do what's called active remote sensing, all right? Geographers use these a lot, is we actually send a signal out to an object that bounces on something and comes back, and we analyze that information. There are animals that do this, so bats for echolocation or dolphins, and there are a few, so humans who are visually impaired, actually I just learned today that some humans who are visually impaired, there is some evidence that they might do a form of echolocation as well. But it's emitting a signal, that signal interacts with the object, comes back to you and gives you data. So animals can do it, but also we see it a lot in terms of radar. So for example, if you've ever had a speeding ticket, the policeman's speed gun is sending a signal out, it hits your car, then bounces back and tells the policeman or policewoman, police person, how fast you're going, right? So it's a way of interacting with data that has gone out and come back. We use active remote sensing quite a bit when we're studying dangerous areas. So for example, if we want to look at landslides in a certain area, or we want to look at some very steep cliffs that might be dangerous for humans to get to, we can use active remote sensing as a way of getting us data and getting back information with the use of drones or aircraft. We use a lot of aircraft as well to get that information. And all of this can get mapped with GIS. In fact, a lot of the data that we punch in, especially if we're looking at like physical geography type data, is going to be gained from planes and from drones. Okay. Good. Okay. So what is this space I keep talking about, right? So if we look at the term space, which comes up a lot, and I know, you know, I'm a Star Wars fan. I'm always like, oh, it means, you know, outer space. But it's referring to 3 specific concepts on here on Earth in terms of space. We break that up into the idea of location, the idea of distribution, and the idea of movement. And all of these are different types of interactions over physical space on planet Earth. Okay. So for location, a location is going to be a precise location or a precise spot of an object. So if you have a map, you can point to the map and say, look, here is a map, here is the thing I'm talking about, right? So it could be a city, it could be a house, it could be a person, it could be an animal. It's something very discrete and specific that, again, you can plot it on a piece of paper. You can point to it on a map, right? It can have an address to it. So if I say Los Angeles, California, that's a very specific point, right? Or the Taj Mahal, a very specific point. Again, might have an address to it. So if I say 1195 Toscal Drive and 95616, that gives you an idea. It's a very specific building and a very specific zip code. Okay, so that's going to be a location where it's very discrete and specific, in that it's not as objective, right? Granted, covered under the stairs is, number one, not real. But if those of you who might be Harry Potter fans, you know that, okay, this is going to be a specific place that was in this specific fiction book series, right? Same if I said, you know, Middle Earth or Gondor or Tatooine. These are both locations that, while not real in the real world, for those who follow those fandoms, are going to have a sense of location of space. Okay, so you know, I wrote this particular slide pre-COVID, but is now especially even more applicable. So this is an example of a parklet. So pre-COVID, this was a big symbol of gentrification. This were up and coming neighborhoods, mostly in San Francisco, a little bit in Oakland, were creating these little like urban park areas in parking lots along streets where people could have like study and have their coffee or have a beer. And a lot of geographers and urban developers were saying this is a symbol of gentrification, that we have more of these. Now with COVID, we can't be inside anymore. So now we're seeing more and more parklets, right? I saw a whole bunch in Burlingame the other day. There's a whole bunch in Pacifica now, right? We see them a lot more often. And that would be a great example of analyzing why are they more common now? Well, because of a public health issue, right? Well, if you were to look at the location of parklets now in 2021 versus in 2015, when this photo here was taken, right? You're going to be comparing these two different phenomenon. You're doing what's called location theory. So location theory is the why of how things are placed and located. Why are there more parklets now than there were 6 years ago? Well, you could say it's for COVID because we need public health. We have more people who want to sit outside. We have more people with dogs who can't bring them inside. Global warming, it's warmer outside, so we want to sit outside more often. It's prettier, right? But you also want to do things like what neighborhoods are having more parklets than others? What restaurants are having more parklets than others? What types of businesses? I saw a parklet that had a nail salon in San Francisco the other day. I had never seen that before. I had never seen an outdoor nail salon before, but there was one in San Francisco. Well, why is there not one in where I live, right? So this is not, of course, just located parklets, but anytime you see any phenomenon, you're like, well, why is that? Again, things are not placed by accident unless the world is just accidentally dropping things. But for the most part, things are placed in the locations for a specific reason. And people who practice location theory, their job is to figure out what that reason is. So I grew up in Vacaville, which is about 2 hours north of here. And Vacaville is a largish city. It's like 100,000 when I lived there. But on either side of Vacaville is open space, right? There is a big open space between Vacaville and Fairfield on one side and Vacaville and Dixon on the other side. So when I moved down here to the peninsula, it really was kind of startling to me that you can drive from Pacifica to Daly City to Colma, and there's no space in between them. You can just drive on that straight line and you just hit 3 different cities. And that was very surprising to me. So that would be an example of why are cities on the peninsula spaced closer together than cities in the North Bay. You could say, well, real estate is a lot more precious on the peninsula. Houses are much more cheaper in the North Bay. North Bay is also a largely agricultural part of the state. And so again, Vacaville had a lot of agriculture, and both Dixon had a very large agriculture. So a lot of the space around Vacaville was ag land. Okay, so those are the kind of things that you can look at. One that I always think is so funny is there is a Target in Colma, and then directly across the street is a Target in Daly City. Why? I do not know, but that would be a great question for someone who's doing location theory to look at. I'm sure somewhere there is a Target representative who has a great idea for it, but to me, it just seems a little bit silly. Okay. And then of course, where should we install parklets? The next one's going to be distribution. I think my face is in the way of this. Move my face a little bit. Okay, so distribution. So distribution is going to be, my face again, is how is different phenomenon located in relation to each other or in relation to space. So if location is just we are a dot on a map, distribution is how does this dot relate to the other dots on the map. So now we're talking about the relationship of things. All right. So if I'm looking at countries that speak French, well, France speaks French, of course, but there are many other countries that speak French. Well, why is that? Right? Why does Canada speak French? Louisiana is not a country, but it is a state that speaks a lot of French. There's a lot of French spoken in Vietnam. And so that distribution of a phenomenon in very different places, Canada and Louisiana and Vietnam are all very different places, but why do they all have a common language? Would then tie this to practices of colonialism or imperialism. So looking at historical context in some ways. Music festivals in California. So maybe you are in Outside Lands or you're at Coachella or Bottle Rock, whatever your festival of choice is. Well, why are they located where they are? If you compare, I've been to Outside Lands, which is in San Francisco, which is pretty foggy. I've been to Coachella, which is in India, which was very hot. Those are very different locations. Why are they located where they are? Or maybe you're looking at a very specific animal. So in the case of the black-footed ferret, why do these animals breed in certain locations of like Montana, Wyoming, Wisconsin, so on and so forth, but not in other parts? So it's very much relationship, okay? Then last but not least is going to be movement. So that's going to be how things move. So we're looking at both phenomenon and people and things, and how are they redistributed over space, okay? So you talk about those ferrets, the black-footed ferrets. So maybe they have a breeding ground in Montana in the summer, but then they move to Idaho for the winter. That would be a type of movement, right? Or maybe we're talking about during COVID, a lot of folks who lived in big cities may have moved back home to be with family in smaller cities. So that would be a movement of people, right? So we're redistributing things over space. And especially when talking, obviously animals and many plants do movement as well, but it's a very human phenomenon about this as well. But of course, if you're studying hurricanes, those move. We can study the movement of the spread of religion or the spread of language, right? That's all going to take place in movement. Those of you in my Geography 150, we had a map showing the spread of Islam from Western Africa to Eastern Africa, right? Well, I should say, yeah, because it's a whole nother lecture. I won't bore you with that for those of you who are not in that class, but we saw that in our Sub-Saharan Africa lecture. Oops. Why is this not working? Oops, I broke my computer already. So we can graph all of these things using GIS, all right? If you're going to be doing location, you might use very specific push pin symbols or dot symbols. If we're looking at distribution, you might choose different colors to show relationships between different types of phenomenon. And if you're doing movement, you can use lines to show how things move over time. So again, this of course not just in GIS, we see it throughout geography, but these are kind of some of the three main facets of movement and location and space distribution when we talk about how we study geography and how it relates to location. That's all I have for you for now. The big priority this week is to make sure that you all have installed your QGIS software. Again, there is a survey for you on your Canvas to make sure that we're all on the same page. Again, if you're having any issues, let me know, because we definitely can troubleshoot that. And I have office hours both in person and online, so let me know what works best for you, and I'll see you next time. Take care.